Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Today I speak with Billy Westbrook from Scrubblades windshield wipers. What I love about his story is that he came up with this idea while driving down the 5 freeway after a bug splattered all over his windshield, and he wanted something better for his car and his sight. He came up with the idea of Scrubblades. It's a story worth hearing because he came up with a good idea while driving and followed the path of what he was very passionate about and finding a niche out there that wasn't quite filled, and became very, very passionate about servicing the public in a unique way with his windshield wipers. I hope you enjoy the story. Welcome to the show, and I've got Billy on the line right now. How you doing, bud?
I'm good, Jim. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. It's always great to have an excuse to catch up with old friends. We've known each other for several years, but we don't stay in as much contact as I'd like to. But you're just absolutely rocking the windshield wiper blade business, right?
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, we just, I know you've got an incredible story, and I want to get it out there because I think it's very encouraging. And I think your approach to business by building a strong foundation is one to be heard and listened to and followed. So, I like to dig back into your history and where things started for you, but maybe could you tell us a little bit about your childhood and what it was like growing up in your household and what kind of gave you that entrepreneurial spirit?
Sure, yeah. So, I grew up in split families. My parents divorced when I was probably 3.
Mm-hmm.
So my father lived in Arizona. My mom moved to Northern California. So I think right off the bat, kind of splitting my time between 2 different households and 2 different groups of friends and schools and all that kind of stuff growing up kind of gave me a sense of I could kind of go into any room and get along with people and read people pretty well, and kind of just figured out, how to get through life and make the best out of it, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
But, it was still a good childhood, and I had plenty of good friends, like I said, and I started just riding BMX. Bicycles were my thing, and kind of did that all the way through my adolescence. And I'd say both sides. My father was an entertainer, so he was kind of an entrepreneur as well. He was chasing his dream of being a musician, and he actually did pretty well and could raise children off of it throughout the years and traveled. And my grandfather was the same. He was very entrepreneurial driven, owned multiple restaurants and bars, and actually started Ram Airways in Reno, Nevada. It was the first airline that I think was flying from Reno to Vegas. Like a short thing, yeah. And he was actually a big inspiration for sure, just seeing how he lived and how he handled business and the type of person he was. And so, yeah, I think that's where I got just my drive to want to always work for myself.
Yeah.
I do remember I had one job. I was a busboy at a pizza place, and it was actually a restaurant my grandfather owned, but he sold at the time, so I was working there, and I think I lasted 3 weeks.
Wow, that worked out great.
Yeah, it was good. It was a learning experience, and it kind of reiterated that I didn't want to work for anyone else, and I think I was 16, 17 at that time. And just kept racing BMX. That was my thing.
So, bringing up BMX, racing bikes, did that turn into a profession for you, and or was it just a passion?
It was a passion. I got to right under the pro level of BMX, but I'm not a big person, so at that time, being in the expert level, that was great. But going to the big boys, the single A and double A pros, they were all, at that time, 180 to 200-pound dudes, and they would just push you up off the berm, so you couldn't really compete much.
Yeah.
And so I think from that point I started doing freestyle and tricks and having fun on my bicycle, and that actually, pulled me to further areas. We started doing, jump shows at schools and churches and filming videos, and that kind of what got me down to Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was good.
So at that point, were you making money at it, or you're still having fun?
Yeah, no, I was making money. Yeah, I was actually, I would say on a decent month. I mean, we were getting paid at that time. Action sports were really booming, probably around $1,500 a show. And for a young guy, just kind of not having much responsibility and riding his bicycle, and it was pretty good.
Yeah. So, interesting transition. You're making a little bit of money. You decide that it's enough to move down to Southern California and continue riding your bikes. Did you think of it as a job at that point, or was it, I'm just having fun and I got a few bucks in my pocket?
Yeah, I think that's how it was. I didn't really think too much into it. I was having fun and had a good group of people around me, and we were traveling the world and not having to pay to travel, so seeing different parts of the world and bringing joy to people. And yeah, it was a good time for sure. But I think at that point I was probably getting into early 20s,
mm-hmm.
And obviously knew that wasn't the future for me. So at that point I started a detail car company, like a automobile detailing company.
Okay.
And started cruising around when I wasn't riding my bike and washing people's cars, and I've always been a clean freak, so that worked out perfect for me. I could sit there and detail people's cars and make them sparkly clean.
Yeah, now I did a little bit of that at a younger age. It was good, easy money, especially in Southern California. Everybody likes their car clean, as opposed to what I'm looking at up here in Montana. It's so dirty up here. But, okay, so you start cleaning cars, you're riding bikes. Now you've got a little bit of income coming in from two. Did you decide either one was enough to really pursue to make a career out of it, or where was your head at? Because
I think I'm not much of a planner at that point. I was just kind of going along. I was making decent money, and the detail company was doing well, and I was kind of transitioning out of making money on the bike side, and been hurt a few times and stuff like that. And during that whole transition is when I actually thought of Scrubblade. I was driving home from a show through Central California, and a big old bug hit my windshield, and it was at nighttime, and mind you, I'm a clean freak, so I went to use the washer fluid and the wiper blades, and it just created this huge smear right across my line of sight.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of frustrating. I was a couple hours away from a gas station to clean the windshield, and lights were glaring through the smear, and it was just really frustrating. I'm like, man, I got water going across the windshield, the blades are going across, why doesn't it just clean the windshield?
Mm-hmm.
And that's right when Scrubblade popped in my head, and I was like, oh, a scrubbing wiper blade, that'd be awesome. And that was, during that time of trying to kind of figure out what I was going to do, and it just really excited me. The idea excited me, and I got home that evening. The next morning I sketched out a drawing and kept pursuing the detailing thing, and life happens. So, a few years later went by before I got a prototype made.
Okay, so I want to go through that a second, because I've been down that freeway. I've been bored driving for hours on end, had a couple good ideas, but none were good enough to go home and jot out kind of what a prototype looked like. So, and by the way, no offense, but I don't know too many people that get excited about windshield wiper blades. Except for when my new pair showed up last week, and I'm dealing with mud and snow up here, by the way, so thank you very much. But, what was it that excited you enough to go home and jot down a prototype on a windshield wiper blade?
Man, I can't really pinpoint it. It was just, it felt like a good idea. It hit me so quick, and I think right away I acknowledged how many cars were on the road all the time, and I was just looking at dollar signs. Every single car was like a $, $. I'm going, huh. And it just seemed like and the name came to me right away, Scrubblade, and I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. It was weird. I just got really excited about it. And just kind of had a good feeling about it. So there you go. You kind of, if you get one of those gut feelings and it just pops in your head and it feels right, at least jot it down on paper. That's step one.
Okay, so you jot it down on paper, life happens, and you move on. You don't do anything with it. So you continue detailing cars, riding bikes a little bit, At what point did you go, hey, I need to circle back to that windshield wiper blade idea?
Right. So I was detailing, it's funny, starting that detail company, if I wouldn't have done that, I don't think Scrubblade would be here. So I met, you meet people detailing their cars and they become customers and you're doing weekly car washes and details and all that stuff. So I was washing this guy's car for probably about 6 months, and I always noticed his garages were full of products. And I'm like, man, what does this guy do? And at the time, eBay was kind of like the online e-com site. So I thought he was just a eBay seller. And I was sitting there talking to his wife one day, and she's like, oh, yeah, we do this and that, and we source products from overseas, and if you ever have an idea that's viable, like my husband could probably, connect you with the right factory. And I'm like, oh, well, here you go. Here's this
Here's
drawing I've had for the last, 2 years, 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave her the drawing, I think, the next day. And from that point, I would say we found a factory within 3 or 4 weeks. Sent drawings back and forth. They would send me what they thought would work. I would change stuff, send it back, and we kind of did that dance for maybe another couple weeks until we landed on something that I thought would work and they thought would work, and went for the prototype.
So the prototype gets developed and shipped over, and it's in your hands now. What are your first thoughts?
Just stoked, excited, can't wait to put it on my truck.
Mm-hmm.
So I was still detailing cars, running around at that time Temecula area. I put the prototype on my driver's side, and I kept my normal wiper blade on my passenger side, and just kind of drove around and worked for a couple of weeks and used the wiper blades, periodically. And over that time, I think it was springtime, you get some bugs here and there and all that kind of stuff running through the wine country, and it worked. I mean, you could visibly see a huge difference from the driver's side, the clarity of the driver's side, to the clarity of the passenger side, and I was just so on cloud nine. I'm like, this thing works, it's amazing, right away I was like, I'm going to be a millionaire. That's what I thought.
I love it.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a feeling like, it was really cool having an idea from just your mind to paper to meeting the right people. And, I could have maybe not had time to wash their cars and start that relationship or whatever, but I did it. I always went out and worked, even if necessarily I didn't have to that day or whatever, you know?
So you're driving around, burning through windshield washer fluid, flipping your windshields on, begging for bugs to hit your windshield. Totally. Loving it. Your prototype's working. What did your first order look like, and how did you figure out how to launch that thing? Did you develop a business plan to do it? Did you raise capital? I mean, what were some of the big steps you took?
Gosh, man. I would say once the prototype worked, from a friend of a friend, I always knew, patent. I always heard you got to have a patent. So I met a gentleman that was an insane patent attorney for healthcare systems, like big companies. And, you could barely talk to the guy. He's so smart. And so I sat down with him and just started working on the patents and what that would look like, and he did searches because, at the end of the day, if you don't have any protection as far as a patent comes, like it's really hard to pursue something, that you can't protect.
Right.
So that was kind of step one for me, and thankfully it came back with, the patent search came back good, and we could keep going down the road. And so I paid for that just through payments over probably a good period of a year to get the initial patent done. And then through that time, still no company, no, sales, no website, no nothing, just kind of trying to get to that point and still getting some prototypes made, little changes and stuff. But and then through the detailing company, I met another guy that became a really good friend of mine, and I was washing his vehicles all the time, and he came to my house one day and was like, hey, he saw my home office. He goes like, what's this Scrubblade thing? I'm like, oh, it's this windshield wiper that scrubs your windshield, and it's something I've been working on. And right away he goes, well, do you need an investor? And I'm like, well, yeah. And he goes, well, I have this, he had a 401k and all this stuff from his other company, from